Welcome everyone, a guy trying here, and today we're going to take a look at building a deck for Treyst Rossum in Altered TCG. I would like to note that this deck guide is incredibly influenced by the top 8 deck lists of the Exalts Championship that was hosted a while ago, and if you're interested in the idea of competitive Altered, feel free to join their Discord, which will be in the description. With that, let's get into it. Treyst Rossum are an Axiom hero whose ability reads, when a card leaves your reserve during the afternoon, if I have less than 5 scrap counters, I gain a scrap counter. If I have 5 or more scrap counters, I gain exhaust me, draw a card, then put a card from your hand in reserve. A very strong ability that, once active, allows you to have access to an incredible amount of card draw, and sets up strong instances of playing from your reserve. To get this ability going, we're going to look to get cards in and out of our reserve as quickly as possible, and because of this, Treyst and Rossum don't have the same sense of value that other decks do. While other decks will hope to get multiple uses out of their cards, we are hoping to play our cards fast and use our ability to keep pace with the card advantage it gives us. This allows us to see more of our deck than other heroes, and hopefully find the cards we need. Let's start with our deck core. These are the cards that I think should be included in every iteration of the deck, and should be baseline for any list. Once we have the core constructed, we'll move on to some options to fill in the remaining slots that can be changed to fit your playstyle, or whatever uniques you may own. First, we're going to have 3 Haven Bravos Bastions. This card is one of the strongest in the game currently, and is basically perfectly tailored to our game plan. Not only does it resupply when played, filling our reserve to turn on our hero ability, but as long as it is on the field, all of our characters will gain a boost when played from reserve, which we were hoping to do anyways. There really isn't anything else to say about this, except this is the overall MVP of the deck. Next, we have Ada Lovelace, a 1/2/1 for 2 that when played from reserve allows us to put a card from our hand into reserve to draw a card. She's actually one of the only Axiom native rares we're going to have in the deck, just because the upgrade of being able to put any card into reserve instead of just permanents is much more consistent, as most versions of the deck will only be running the 3 Havens as their permanents. She's cheap to play and she helps fill our reserve while keeping card advantage, so she's an easy 3 of. Now we're going to move on to a card that I was initially pretty skeptical of. Yes, Yzmir Stargazer has above rate stats for a 1 cost, but she's vanilla, and is it really worth the rare slot for 1 extra stat? I would say no, normally the rare slot is not worth that, but in this instance it's not the 1 extra stat that is actually the main appeal here. What Stargazer is really doing is giving us access to another good 1-drop that can fill out our turns, helping us speed up our scrap counters in the beginning of the game, and possibly giving us massive stats if Haven is in play. Finishing up the rares for our deck core is Lyra Chronicler. Chronicler's main function is to give us a free scrap counter by using her support ability to resupply, although her 4/0/4 stats can also help win an expedition on occasion. Because Chronicler's role in the deck is mostly for early game, I'm only going to put 2 copies of her in our core with the option to add the 3rd later. Moving on to our commons, we're going to begin with our best early game card, Kelon Elemental. Kelon Elemental's strong stats are great at making plays at the start of the game, but more importantly, their usually negative play from hand effect of putting a card from our hand into reserve is actually going to help us start creating our scrap counters. While we would usually have to play a card and then wait for it to hit reserve during rest, this allows us to jumpstart the process and sets up our value engine. There isn't really too much to say about our next card. Amelia Earhart is probably the most basic card in the deck. Just a 2/2/2 for 1 from reserve, but it feels great to play her off a Kelon Elemental or after Treyst and Rossum's ability. Axiom Salvager is an at-rate 1 cost from hand, which can help us use our extra mana in our early turns, and then resupplies for 2 when played from reserve, helping us keep card advantage. Once we have more cards in the base of Axiom, I could easily see this card being upgraded to a rare slot for the cheaper resupply, but with the limited number of good low-cost commons for the deck, I think it works best as a common for now. Coppélia is probably my favorite card in the deck, just because I find her to be incredibly interesting. When she's sent to reserve from your hand by way of Kelon Elemental, Ada Lovelace, or Treyst and Rossum's ability, you may play her for free and she gains a sleep. Because she's hitting the reserve and then being played, you will get a scrap counter as her ability resolves, so that's a plus. And while you're telegraphing plays for the following turn when she wakes up, I'm not one to turn down free stats when offered. Foundry Mechanic is mainly helping to fill out our low-cost card pool, but does have an interesting application to make up for being slightly below rate. You can use their ability to reduce the cost of Haven, but you can also just use it to discard them if you really need a scrap counter. You don't have to have a playable permanent to proc their support, and sometimes it'll be a great way to reach our 5th scrap. Rounding out our commons and completing our deck core is gonna be Tinkerbell. There isn't anything flashy about Tinkerbell. She just allows us to have sabotage that doesn't get disrupted by our resupplies. She's more of a reactionary card, so I'm only putting 2 of her in our core. Now that we have our deck core completed, we have 11 rares and 17 commons currently in the deck, so let's figure out some options to help fill it out. Haven Bouncer and Anasi are both cards that work well from either hand or reserve. Haven Bouncer adds more sabotage to our deck when played from hand, and extra boost when played from reserve, so she's a very versatile card. While Anasi gains boosts based on the number of cards in your reserve, which can get pretty high under the right circumstances. Dr. Frankenstein, Moon Merchant, and Bravos Vanguard all essentially equal an additional card from reserve when you get down to it. Moon Merchant has unconditional resupply, while Dr. Frankenstein is cheaper from reserve with evenly distributed stats, but can only resupply if Haven is in play. Bravos Vanguard allows you to remove fleeting from a character, letting you play them from reserve the following turn while also giving a boost for the current turn. While she is able to use this ability from both hand and reserve, it does require that you have a character already in play, and doesn't allow you to draw deeper into your deck like Dr. Frankenstein or Moon Merchant. For this reason, I don't think I'd run more than 2 of Bravos Vanguard. Martengale is basically another Foundry Mechanic, but their support discounts any card. Martengale would be an auto-include if they were a common, but since this is a rare slot, I would only include 2. Kelon Cylinder can be great for sneaking in boost to win you expeditions, but we'd pretty much always prefer to have Haven when we can. I'd really only run Cylinder if you have uniques that need landmarks to function, or if you're running Athena. Sure, you'll end up replacing them as soon as you draw Haven, but having these additional landmarks can increase your consistency when you need them. I would run 2 if you decide to go with this playstyle. Kraken's Wrath is wide board removal that can help you close out games, but can really brick your hand, so I'd only run 1. And if you want to go in for making the deck more consistent overall, you can always add the 3rd Chronicler. Both Dr. Frankenstein and Foundry Armorer are both on the costlier side of our curve, but can be very useful. Like the rare version, Dr. Frankenstein gives conditional resupply and decent stats, while Foundry Armorer gives better stats from reserve that can be split between expeditions. Kelon Burst and Boom are good methods of removal that can be added to the deck. Boom is able to discard any character or permanent, but has the additional cost of sacrificing one of your own characters. Kelon Burst allows you to maintain your board presence, but requires a hand cost of 4 or less and only sends to reserve. Overall, I favor Kelon Burst, but I do think both have their uses. Hooked is incredibly fun to play with, allowing you to switch a character's expedition to your advantage. Because you can target any character, Hook can be used in a number of ways. Athena is mostly a win more card because you want to play her when you already have 2 Havens in play, and at that point you should be churning out stats. She can help you keep consistent value against grindier decks, but I wouldn't run more than 2 since she can easily cause you to brick. Jian doesn't bring anything that exciting to the table, but he does have a low cost and a good forest stat, which is the region type least represented in this deck. Still, I wouldn't run more than 2. And again, to finish our highlighted options, you can add the 3rd Tinkerbell if you want to complete the set. Which leaves us with uniques. Currently, I think uniques are not consistent enough to build your deck around, and should instead upgrade the role of cards in your deck. We're looking for cheap cards that can give us bonuses from reserve, cards that allow us to place cards into our reserve, or cards that help us through support abilities. The only more specific unique I would propose for this deck is Coppélia with passive abilities, since they can be played and put to sleep after being sent to reserve, allowing their passives to apply to the board for 2 turns. At the moment, I only have 2 uniques in Axiom, but I actually think both can slot well into Treyst Rossum. My Frog Prince is a 1 cost from hand, so I can easily get it into my reserve during the beginning of the game, and when played from reserve can be a 4/2/4 for 3. It's not amazing, but it can function well in the deck. My Chronicler is basically just the rare version that can occasionally help me discard a card from my reserve to create scrap, but I'm mainly using it to free up a rare slot from my deck. If I get better uniques, I can easily slot them in, but these will do for now. With all that, this is what I chose for my final deck list. I have 2 Bravos Vanguard and 2 Martengale to fill up my rares, along with 2 Hooked, 2 Kelon Burst, and the 3rd Tinkerbell to complete my deck. This puts me into a more aggressive playstyle, hoping to get my ability online early and then overwhelm my opponent with card advantage. The main deck we're going to struggle with is Waru, which unfortunately is an incredibly strong deck in the early meta. Robin Hood taxes destroy our tempo, Monolith Legate can sabotage outside of afternoon, denying us scrap, and Quetzalcoatl can generate huge value against us. Still, I think Treyst Rossum is a deck that can perform well, while also teaching good fundamentals as we start learning the game. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found this helpful in some way. This is my first video, so feel free to let me know in the comments what you enjoyed, or what you think can be improved on. I'm really excited to see where Altered goes, and if you're interested too, feel free to like and subscribe. That's all for now, but I hope we see each other again soon. Peace.